Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Elena Martinez, and I will be one of the facilitators for this session, along with Professor William Masters. We're both from Tufts University. I just want to have some brief announcements from the conference first. We want to thank you so much for taking part in ANH 2022, and we look forward to a robust interactive session today. So a quick reminder that you can find the conference materials and program on the ANH Academy website, which is anh-academy.org/ANH2022. So as I said, I'm Elena Martinez. I'll be facilitating with Professor William Masters, and I'm going to pass it over to him to say a few words about ANH Academy Week.
Yes, well, this is the first learning lab of the entire event this year. And people might know that this is the 7th annual. And, I have a couple of children. You might know some 7-year-olds. You know what happens when kids turn 7. They get a mind of their own. I actually Googled and searched, like, what are the milestones? Like, what happens, kids start growing up. They become much more themselves. And I think ANH Academy has very much done that. And thinking about like what happens when a child turns 7, and maybe a little bit when the ANH Academy turns 7, getting that mind of their own, doing their own thing, being themselves, asserting themselves, very, very important. I looked at this list of things. They start learning numbers. Kids at 7 get numerate, and the ANH Academy is becoming, more always mixed methods, always qualitative and also quantitative. And we're just learning so much about the world numerically, mathematically, the facts. Kids at age 7 start getting more care for others, a sense of community. They know who their friends and neighbors are. And I feel like the ANH Academy has really done that. And also their language skills evolve a lot. So I looked and it said that children at age 7 often learn that words have multiple meanings, like the same word has different meanings. And I'm like, yeah, that's really true for ANH Academy. And especially that when you learn that words have multiple meanings, you gain a sense of humor. You can have puns. So children at age 7 will start to have jokes and puns. And I feel like we have our own sort of community with references and jokes that we know. So around this room, this would be made possible only by the people who created this child. So the grandparents of the ANH Academy, now retired from work. Jeff Wagi, working with John McDermott, brought together funding now through Imana and originally through the CGIAR, through the A4NH program of the CGIAR. We're able to jumpstart this activity with support from UK Foreign Aid and now the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and assemble this amazing staff who create this event. So without the people, there would be no 7-year-old ANH Academy Week, in this case 2 weeks going on. So our support here is Emily Vivian and Zach Gersten. Steph Ray is on the call, Sylvia Levy, people who are working around the world, actually, mostly from London, but not all from London, to make this possible. There's the group in South Africa, very, very important, and we really appreciate that that in-person presence. So over the 7 years, obviously in person for the first 4 of them, going back and forth between Africa and Asia, and now worldwide. And looking at the list of participants, we now have 131 people on the call. There are names I recognize from both Africa and Asia online simultaneously, much less travel time, much less carbon emission, and we can spread this out over the 2 weeks, which would be impossible to do if we were all together in person. So many more of us are joining, many more of us are able to have dialogue, and I personally greatly miss being in person with the few of you who could have been, but I personally greatly appreciate the fact that we can be so many more of us, that we can be a bigger community, more inclusive, much less expensive, less carbon emissions. I'm glad to be here online with you. Thanks for joining. I appreciate the people who've taken their video on so I can actually see you. But even if your video's off, I know you're here. I appreciate it, and really thank you for joining this session and the Academy Week.
Great. Thank you, Will. So we just wanted to give you minutes to introduce ourselves. I see some of you have already introduced yourselves in the chat. If you haven't already, tell us your name, where you're calling in from, what you're interested in. I am a PhD candidate at Tufts University. I'm calling today from the United States, from Boston. And I'm very excited to share this work and these tools with you. Will, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I go by Will Masters, and happy to communicate with you individually by email. Our emails are very simple at Tufts, william.masters@tufts.edu. And I was able to be part of the launch of the ANH Academy and leading our fellowships program, and then especially building this SCANR resource that we'll talk about today. So it's just been a real pleasure to be part of this. Academically, I'm an economist. So if you have questions about or interest in economics, particularly interested in talking about that just from my own background, but like you, I'm motivated by the agriculture, nutrition problems of the world in general, and very curious about agronomy, veterinary issues, whatever background you're coming from. Be really keen to learn from all of us about how these pieces fit together, as the SCANR tool, I think, helped us to do.
So in this session, we're going to introduce SCANR, which we've mentioned a few times, which is a web tool called the Support Center for Agriculture and Nutrition Research. And it provides resources and guidance for carrying out interdisciplinary research related to agriculture, food systems, nutrition, and health. And we're going to delve a little bit more into what's available, and why we wanted to create it. So first, Will tell us a bit more about just the motivation for creating this tool.
Yeah, so when we started the ANH Academy, the vision that Jeff Wage brought to it, and that John McDermott from the CGIAR brought in as well, is that there was this increasing need and opportunity and desire of people who had been specialized in one area or another to talk across disciplines in agriculture, nutrition, and health. People like myself, who had grown up focusing on agriculture as a path out of poverty, were increasingly asked to talk about health. And we had to learn, like, how does nutrition even get measured? How does it get analyzed? And we realized that people were talking very different languages, using different words for the same thing, and often the same thing with different words. And that the kinds of data that people were using were very different. Sometimes the scale of observation was an individual, sometimes a household, or a district, or a grid cell in a geocoded data set, or sometimes just a national total. That data only existed as the national total. There was no underlying disaggregation. And we realized that people, because of the different languages and types of communication, because of the different kinds of data, it was very hard to bring the community together without some explicit acknowledgement of the differences in the kinds of data and the challenges of bringing them together. So the ANH2022 grant from UK Foreign Aid and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation explicitly asked the ANH Academy to do this synthesis work. So the idea of the synthesis program of AMANA was to help lead the ANH Academy in bringing together different kinds of research. So you've probably seen our evidence and gap map work that was done by Delia Sparling and others. You've probably seen our technical working groups trying to bring together new ideas about, say, agriculture, nutrition, and mental health. And you've probably seen a lot of the literature reviews and other things that get presented here. So we built to contribute to the synthesis idea of bringing together different languages and different kinds of data. We were able to fund Elena and others to build out this website, a place where people could go for resources, and just think, what resources could we put there that would be a destination, that would be a place of conversation? So there would be forums and blog posts and content that would help people, wherever you're coming from, to have an on-ramp to have a way of joining together. So as we built experience with this, we realized that people needed not just that initial on-ramp, but also like ongoing, in some sense, and we called it support. So the idea is that this website is a place to have links to other data, links to other resources that is ANH specific. So it's particular to the problem of people from agriculture, nutrition, or health coming together. It's focused on quantitative data. So brings out to the qualitative research as well to inform, to do the pre-search or formative research that would underlie any particular study you might do. But that the support center for agriculture, nutrition research, or SCANR, that word, that acronym SCANR, designed to be like, oh, you're looking for something and we're going to help you find it. You're doing some research, some discovery, and this SCANR website will help you find that, is designed to do that. So our primary audience are people who have perhaps no experience at all looking for new data. But the goal of support is to ensure that if you have a little bit, a lot, or even very much experience in one area, this will be of value to you. So our hope is that absolutely everyone on this call will find something of value in SCANR, that many of you will find a lot of value, that many of you will see things that are missing and need to be added, that many of you will see things that are confusing and need to be clarified, and that this is a work in progress. So we're going to keep building it. We're going to keep improving it, thanks to you, and especially thanks to Elena, who has combed the world, really, for the content that we're going to share and discuss today.
Great, thank you, Will. So we're going to move forward with the session, and there's a lot of people on this call, so we're going to have a few opportunities to join some breakout rooms to really get to know a few other people on the call and share some of your experiences doing interdisciplinary research in the agriculture, food systems, nutrition, and health space, and learn about your experiences creating data and sharing and using secondary data and some of the opportunities and challenges that come along with publicly available data and how we can use it to enhance our research. We're also going to take some time to introduce this web tool to you and give you a bit of a guided tour of what's on the website and give you the opportunity to go explore yourself. And then we also are hoping to get some of your, both positive and critical feedback on what you find there, what's useful to you, what's not useful to you, what's confusing, what's missing. So we hope that you'll kind of openly share your opinions with us throughout this session. So as we get started, I've noticed there are people here from all over the world. I really appreciate you joining. It's still rather early in the morning for us in Boston, and I think for some of you, it's already kind of late at night. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to join the conference. And we want to learn a little more about your experiences with primary and secondary data. So we're going to start with a little poll. Okay, so you should be seeing our first poll question. You can go to this URL at the top of the page to participate in the poll. The URL is pollev.com/ actually, I'm hoping someone can put this in the chat. Will, could you do that? Put the URL in the chat. And if you would rather text, you can actually text 22333 to join the poll and then participate as we go along. So let's see some responses. It looks like most of you have collected primary data. A lot of you have also analyzed secondary data. It's really interesting to see that while most of us have collected primary data, not many of us have shared our own primary data publicly online. I'd love to hear if someone wants to post in the chat, maybe why didn't you share your data online? I think there's a lot of reasons why you might not do that. Oh yeah, this is great. So Zach says there's not a lot of guidance for qualitative data, right? And also it's very hard to share qualitative data online without accidentally sharing identifiable information. All right, apologies to anyone who didn't get to participate in the poll. Let's go on to our next question. So in the next one, we just want you to share some text. What publicly available data or data sets have you used in the past? So just throw out some names of data sets that you have used so we can see what type of information you've used, what experiences people have had. And this is really interesting. We're seeing some of the big data sets in our field. And if you do get locked out of the survey, just add your thoughts to the chat. We can see that rolling through as well. A few people have mentioned geospatial data, some smaller surveys. So it's really great. We have a really good variety of experience in this lab. That's really great to see. So it's great to hear kind of across the board. We have a lot of diversity of experiences and backgrounds, it sounds like, in this lab. So we're going to do our first set of breakout rooms. And we're thinking of this as kind of as if we were still sitting in an in-person conference 3 years ago, and you had sat at a table with 6 or 7 people that you didn't know yet. And we want you to kind of meet your virtual table of people that you'll get to chat with during this breakout room. So we're going to randomly sort you into breakout rooms. And in this room, we want you to first introduce yourselves to each other, share your name, where you're calling in from, if you're working or studying somewhere, and then share some of the publicly available data sources that you've used in the past or that maybe you've contributed to generating yourself. And we'll just ask that each room designate a note taker, and we'll come back and share a little bit about what data sources everyone is using. All right, hi everyone. I see we're all filtering back into the main room. It takes us about a minute or so to get everyone back in here. I hope you had an opportunity to meet some conference attendees from, hopefully from a different part of your country or different country. And hopefully you'll see some of these people throughout the week in other learning labs and even in some of the conference sessions next week. As we have everyone coming back in, I hope you all kind of took note of some of the different data sources that people have used. So if you could either maybe drop in the chat some of what you discussed, or if you're feeling particularly brave, unmute and tell us what you heard from people in your breakout room.
So hello, my name is Yvonne Go. So I was in breakout room 12. So our group was an interesting group of students, postdocs, and a PhD in economics, which was very interesting. And for the data sources, DHS was quite top on the list. Food composition tables were also used by some of the team members. And for the economist, he brought very different data sources like World Bank and even Yahoo Finance. So that was interesting to know that people have used that kind of data to analyze, to do academic research. Yeah, so basically, I think that's what we got from our group. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see one person in the chat wants to join next. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Elena. My group had interesting people. I had Salis, Inderdeep, Harry, Happy, I think, yeah, and Nehmet. And we sort of coming from different backgrounds altogether, but at the same time, we have collected data before, both primary and secondary. And then some of the data sources that were mentioned that I managed to capture included national surveys that the government would be displaying, related to the project, of course. And then government data sources, research work that people are doing through MPH for the dissertations that people are doing, or could be project-oriented research for a particular program that you're developing. We've got NGO data sets that they also have both primary and secondary data for the work that they've done previously.
I'm happy to hear we have people from many different stages of their careers in here, and also a lot of different academic and work backgrounds. Did anyone else want to share back what you discussed in your room?
Yes, I can speak on behalf of Babatunde, Jacqueline, Silva, Yeah, mainly I had the fellows from Nigeria, Babatunde, I don't know, I mean from Brazil, Sylvia, who is currently based in Scotland, in UK, doing a PhD research. So we got interacted with them, and they had the following from them about the data set that they've interacted. They have Babatunde from Nigeria is actually comprehensively instructed with the demographic health survey data, and Sylvia as well. She got interacted with the household budget survey, agriculture census, and me personally, I've interacted with the data on crop production and in terms of the acres. I mean, the number of the acres that are being planted. I mean, the number of the crop that are being produced per acres, as well as the data set on the, I mean, drought status in the ASAL areas.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so I think we'll move on. Feel free to keep sharing in the chat, but we want to take a little time to give you a tour of this SCANR website. I'm going to put the URL in the chat. So if you want to open it on your own computer and just explore freely as we're going, go ahead. And I will also share my screen as I show you the website. So whichever works best for you will be great. So here's SCANR. I assume many of you have been on the ANH Academy website since you successfully registered for this conference. So SCANR lives on the full ANH Academy website as one of the main sections here. But it's kind of different from the rest of the website in that instead of telling you about the project or the network, SCANR is a support center and a resource center and connects resources with research and guidance for different types of interdisciplinary research and for different stages of the research process. So here I'm showing you the main landing page of SCANR. And we highlight some key parts just from the main page. A lot of the bulk of the resources fall under this research guidance section, which provides links out to resources, tools, and then tips for each stage in the research process. And you'll find that SCANR, it's not a written out guide. We haven't tried to write all of our own recommendations for research. What we want to do is actually provide a dynamic website and a dynamic tool that connects you to the many, many resources that are out there, almost all of them free and publicly available, that anyone can use on the internet to help enhance your own research. So, and one of the things we'd love you to think about as we go through SCANR is that we've really built this out with a lot of tools. And we know that a lot of you either have tools that you use or perhaps create your own research tools that may be appropriate for this resource. So we've organized this as kind of walking you through the research process. So first, we have sections on how to find publicly available secondary data. For example, we have a page here with a detailed list of data repositories, mainly related to agriculture, nutrition, and health, where you can find publicly available, open, reliable data that can be used in different projects. And you'll see that there's a lot of databases and dataverses here, but you may actually think of a lot of things that aren't on here. So feel free to tell us if you think there's things that would be really useful for people in the ANH Academy community that aren't here yet. Then we also have a section on collecting primary data. And you'll see we link out to a lot of guides about data collection. We have a section on identifying questions and methods. And here we dig into things like reviewing literature, how to identify the right methods, metrics, and tools, how to incorporate different themes, and how to look across interdisciplinary frameworks. And what you'll find on a lot of these pages is that we link out to, reliable, useful tools. And then we insert some little tips for research. But again, SCANR is not itself a written out guide for doing research. We want to bring together the many, many resources that are available on the internet, but that are often kind of hard to find and curate for yourself while you're also trying to go through the process of your own projects and research. And then we've also put together quite a few resources on using data software, because we find that this is a place where a lot of people need support and get stuck in the process of doing research, whether it's collecting primary data or analyses of publicly available secondary data. So we've put together a lot of resources on using statistical software, including Excel, R, Python, SAS, Stata, and then divided some of these resources into tips for, say, cleaning data, analyzing data, and then further down, advice for how to use those resources for data visualization. Because I don't know about you, but I find myself every time I do these things looking up new resources to expand my skills. And then we have resources on how to communicate results, whether it's to the scientific community, to the government community, or to other stakeholders. So there's a lot here, and I hope that you're either following along or just taking yourself on your own tour of the website. I would also encourage you to check out, we have a teaching resources page, and this is its own set of very comprehensive resources that are materials for professors or lecturers or others teaching in the ANH space to use in their courses or in other forums. So there's actually quite a bit here. I won't give a detailed tour, but that's really a great addition to SCANR. And then we also have a section of use cases, and these are kind of examples of how the resources could be used. And you'll see we have a forum that, I'm not logged into the website, but we have a forum where we hope that people who use SCANR can post questions, post suggestions, and kind of interact with each other. And through that forum, you can also interact with many other parts of the ANH Academy website. So I see one person in the chat has already asked a question. Guidelines for data security and authorship. We have a few resources in here on this already, but I think you're right that there's a lot to be said on this topic. And we saw at the beginning of the session that many of you have collected data but not shared it. And there's many, many very logical reasons why you wouldn't be able to share data or maybe have to delay sharing your data. Okay, so now that we've gotten a bit of a tour, I want to give you a chance to discuss again. So we're going to send you back into the breakout rooms, but this time we want you to talk about the best and worst features of SCANR. We want you to think about, go through the website together and think about what is useful to you. Maybe find one or two things that you would actually use in your research, and find one or two things that either are confusing or that you think are missing or poorly explained. So we already heard one, but I'm sure you'll have a lot of other ideas. And then we'll come back after about 10 minutes and discuss with the full group. Welcome back, everyone. So I hope that was a productive discussion for many of you. As we start to discuss, again, I want to give an opportunity to anyone who wants to unmute and tell us what you talked about. And also, if you can share in the chat, what did you find? Let's start with what you found useful, or what you might actually want to use for your own research. So feel free, whether you were the note taker in your group or not, to share in the chat. And then I see Anjali, you've raised your hand, so go ahead.
Yeah, so we were a group of 4, and Sunita, Anjali, and I'm sorry, I'm not able to pronounce the both name. So we discussed a lot about data sharing and issues in India, certain restrictions which are there, and how we can use different data sets and what we are doing. But we still find difficulties in, doing the research process and making the data shareable in format simultaneously, especially when there are no specific positions for that on the projects. So we discussed a few issues related to that, that it's very interesting to share data. We know importance of sharing data, but still many a times many of us have unshared data which will be useful for others. The reasons are restrictions, confidentiality, no time for formatting it in the shareable format and things. And I find your website very useful. Thank you so much.
So I'm hearing a lot, and in some of the rooms I popped into, people are also talking about these difficulties with data sharing. So I'm glad we'll keep talking about that during this session. Go ahead, Felix.
All right. The website is very resourceful in the aspect of we're able to, from room 24, Steph was able to guide us around and to explore how to identify research gap. We'll find out that the website have already analyzed all the methods, all the necessary research that have been conducted with a particular data, and still open up, have a place to show you a research gap that has not been filled. So this is a very important aspect of research, which you don't easily find out. So the website have taken good care of that. And another thing is that we'll try to see some resources. The website have been able to bring all the resources in a concise way such that when you click, it will give direct you to a particular site where you see all that you're looking at for instead of searching randomly. So it's a very good resource for research career, and I hope to utilize it very well. Thank you.
I see a lot of people are sharing in the chat, so please keep doing this. I think a common thread I'm seeing in the chat is, Andrea says, you have to be diligent in questioning data that's shared online, understand how it's connected, who's choosing it, what's included and excluded. I think that's such a great topic to bring up. There's a lot of data repositories shared on this site and many other sites. And sometimes it can be hard to know where the data came from. If someone shares an indicator, how did they get the information behind that indicator? So we'll take some time in a few minutes to dig into a few sources of publicly available data and think about whether we actually know where the data came from. I see Diane says, how were the resources chosen? What was the process? That's a great example. On this site, we've filtered through a lot of resources available and tried to choose the ones that we think are high quality and also usable and accessible without any memberships or fees, because we want all of the resources linked on SCANR to be available to anyone. But you're right, it's a con. You need to also go through and say, do I trust each of these resources in my own work? Let's see. And we also see someone say, we have to continually add resources. And that's true. One of the biggest things we think about SCANR is that we hope this will be a dynamic website where members of the ANH Academy community will go on here and say, wait a second, there's actually a really great resource that you don't know about, but that I use. And then we can add to it together as a community. Does anyone else want to share out loud what they discussed? I see a hand up. Dembi, go ahead.
Yes, okay. This is Vivian here.
Oh, go ahead, Vivian.
Yeah, I found that all the people in the breakup group 15 where I was hadn't looked at SCANR. This is the first time. This is my first time. So I'm wondering if I hadn't investigated better before this time. But it seems to have a lot of resources that we all agreed we're going to be digging into. So yeah, that's where we are in the breakup group 15.
I'm happy to hear that it's your first time seeing it. And also it tells us we need to communicate better about the resources we're putting together through the ANH Academy. Okay, I see one person with a hand raised. Do you want to?
Okay, yes. I was also appreciating the fact that it covers the various stages of the research. And the one thing that's missing for me is my specific area of interest, which is agricultural extension and agricultural education and training. That I would love to see resources from those areas.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very important point. The value of ANH Academy is that we have people from so many different backgrounds, and also the challenge of ANH Academy is that we have so many people from many different backgrounds.
Yes. I think I have discussed about that in our chat group. Very important thing is the question we need to have some time, have something like a survey and make the comments through after going through the website and analyze all the areas. Because me, I'm working precisely on data, youth and land access data. So it's really important that I will analyze and see if the scan is taking account, the variable or is taking account all of these kind of variable that we are looking. For example, we have done one kind of data collection, and we see that ethnic and language is very big barrier for youth land access in Africa. So you see, so we need to see how we will include language and ethnic business model to this, and then in the local community we will have more facilities to collect data. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm going through the chat again, and another thread I see is that there's a lot of information about data software, but not all of us can access data software, and that's a really big issue. We've tried to include information about certain softwares that are open and available on the internet, like R, and also about softwares that we know people use but require licenses. But there's certainly a lot of barriers to getting access to many of these softwares. Okay, so for the last part of the Learning Lab, we've heard a lot of you bring up the challenges of making data shareable. And from the other side, when we're looking for sources of publicly available data, knowing how the data were collected, what's in the data set, whether we think it's reliable, and how to solve problems that might come up when using it. Because I think many people on this call have used secondary data that somebody else made public online. And often you have a lot of questions, even when it's pretty well documented. You might have a lot of questions about what's in there. Maybe you find some mistakes. So we're going to talk a little bit about data sharing principles and then explore some publicly available data sets together and talk about some of our experiences using publicly available data. I'm going to share my screen again. And I love this graphic of the FAIR data principles. When we think about the kind of ideal of sharing data publicly on the internet for others to use, we want our data to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So what do we mean by that? We want the data to be findable, right? We want it to be easy to find on the internet. We want it to be indexed with keywords. We want it to have a unique URL that's persistent, that over time it can be found at the same URL. And we want the data set to be described well with metadata that allows you to actually use a search engine to find data that might be of interest to you. We want our data to be accessible. We want both the data and the metadata to be free and open, so any one of us can access and download them, so there's not a fee. We want data to be interoperable. If data is open, we want it to be available in a format that can be downloaded without special tools or software or super special skills. And we want the metadata that accompanies it to be accessible and written in broadly understood language, so that we understand what's in it and can compare it to other data sets. And then we want data to be reusable. So to do that, we need metadata accompanying it that describe it clearly with enough detail where someone could actually use it for new analyses or even replicate the results of a given study. So as I was looking through the SCANR data repositories preparing for this, thought it might be interesting to look actually at some of the sources of data that we have on SCANR together and think about whether we think these data sets are openly shared and what issues may come up when we're looking at them. So as we go through these, I encourage you to add your thoughts in the chat, or if you want to unmute and interrupt me and give some of your opinions on what we're talking about. So I chose one data set first from the Harvard Dataverse, which is a resource I go to a lot looking for publicly available data. This one was shared by the International Food Policy Research Institute. And we can see that this is a study of the impact of COVID-19 on rural men and women in Ghana. And the Harvard Dataverse gives a lot of opportunities to document the data set. And you'll find if you look through the Dataverse that some are really well documented and others are less well documented. But I liked this example so we can see they've given a good description of the data set. They've shared some subjects and keywords. So theoretically, you could use a search engine to try to find this. Then they've shared their data files as well as a code book and a questionnaire. So that would help us know what the variables are and how to use them. And then they've shared some relatively comprehensive metadata. They have a DOI, so they have a persistent URL. You can see further down, they actually list the specific researchers that worked on this. And on Harvard Dataverse, there's an opportunity to offer an email address if you want to reach out to someone. And then they provide more specific metadata on multiple types of data that are in the data set. So in the chat, I'd love to hear, what do you think of this site? What questions would you still have if you wanted to use this for your own research? If you're interested in reanalyzing some of this data, what questions might you still have for the investigators to be able to actually use this? Yeah, Diana says a link to already published articles. That's definitely true. Sometimes on these sites we'll see, so there's one related publication that we can see here that they published a fact sheet that's related to this, but it would be interesting to know, did they already analyze these data? They're shared online, so they probably have already written an article about it. Anna says, were the data cleaned and how? Are they ready to use? Right, so we can see the files that they chose to share and the code book, but we would have to dig in further to know, are these data really ready to use? How much background information on the project are you going to need to actually be able to use these data? Also be curious to know, do people think that this is a good example? Do you think these data are fair and open? I see some light nods in there that maybe they are. I would say this is a really good example of people. Some of you have shared data online, so you're probably looking at this and saying, wow, they probably actually took a long time to get these files ready and share them. This is pretty detailed documentation. Okay, so let's move on to a second example, and this is really different. I'm going to share the URL for this in the chat. This is a very different example of open data. So this is the Open SGD Data Hub. And this is an online hub of geospatial data that can be used to track the SDGs over time. So I thought this was an interesting example because it's completely different. So I would encourage you to go to the website and maybe click on one of one of the SDGs and dig into what indicators you see there. So maybe I'm interested in clean water and sanitation. I want to know what information we have here. So I can see that they're listed by indicator. So I might click on here, indicator of proportion of population using safely managed drinking water services. So I can see this gives me some geospatial data. I can see the indicator name, but I would encourage you to go in and try to figure out, can you tell how this is measured? Can you tell where the data came from? So I think this is an interesting resource because it provides, this is much more varied and comprehensive. This is providing us indicators on many of the different SDGs, but it's actually really difficult in a database like this to know what organization collected these indicators. They're probably collected by many different organizations. What is the data source? It's usually not linked back to a specific data source. So it would actually be kind of difficult for us to take these indicators and use them in our research beyond just using them for a bit of background information. So I wanted to show this example because I think this is in good contrast. And I don't want to say that this website isn't useful. It's very useful for us to understand the tracking on the SDGs, but these are really not open data because we don't really know where they came from and we can't really use them going forward. Okay, so I wanted to show one more example because another thing that we often do, or that I often do when I'm looking for a data set, is I might look at an article and then say, oh, well, are the data from this article available? Could I go back and dig into, say, I went to BMJ Global Health and I thought this was an interesting article about news coverage of Mexico's front of packaged food label policy. And is it possible for me to go back and dig into the data a little bit and see? And I chose BMJ because they have been rather vocal about making data from their articles available for accountability. And I went through quite a few articles from BMJ Global Health and found that I actually couldn't find links to publicly available data for any of them. And a lot of them said this that you see at the bottom: data are available on reasonable request. So for anyone who has made data available on reasonable request, what does that mean?
In principle, it means if you send them an email, they should send it to you. But it's pretty time consuming. As a recipient of those emails, I know that it's not always the top of my to-do list.
Yeah, I see someone else in the chat laughing a little bit, and I agree, right? So we have a lot of variety, and I thought it was worth pointing that out, that it's hard to make data publicly available. And the authors of this article are not vindictively hiding their data away. They probably have faced a lot of time and logistical challenges in sharing data. So we're going to do one more round of breakout rooms with your same group. And in this one, we want you to talk specifically about your experiences either sharing data publicly, because we already heard first thing in this session that a lot of you have collected data but not shared it. And a few of you have collected data and then were able to share it. And also a lot of you have used secondary data. So in this session, we want you to think of one project where you use secondary data or shared primary data. Where did the data come from? Where did you get it? What were your successes along the way? What was really easy about this? And then where did you get stuck? And what were the barriers to actually using a data set or successfully sharing your data set? So before we wrap up the session, I would love to hear some sharing back of anything you found interesting in your room. What were your successes of sharing data or using publicly available data, and what were the big challenges people in your group had?
I'll share, since I'm a professor and a research dietitian, and I try to do this with my students, but to share data like you presented in that really good example it just takes, as a researcher, so much time. Like I was telling the ladies, it's like writing another paper, but for a different purpose. However, from the perspective of a professor and a mentor, I try to teach my students to do this because, and I mentioned to Andrea and Sandra, like you're going to go back to that data and you're going to wish that you did this for yourself, like naming the variables so you know what they are, describing the data set for yourself. So really, doing it for the purpose of sharing it is a really good idea. And I wish that I had the time to do it or an assistant to help me do it. That really is my only barrier to sharing, to be honest. And they were saying that they do use publicly available data, but if it's not in a format, like you mentioned, that you can use easily and decode for yourself, you're going to go back and forth to me asking like, what the hell is this? You know what I mean? So the data hygiene point of keeping everything organized and explained, just for me, takes so much time in and of itself. So as a graduate student, I echo to all of you guys to be able to do that and share it. And you will be asked to do that for many publications as I have. I mean, I'm one of those, please, reasonable sharing requests. And if I can meet that request, I do it. For certain systematic reviews, I've been asked to share certain variables, which is easier for me to do, because I can just pull the variables and create a quick sheet versus that very nice example that you showed of the description, all the metadata, the hashtags and whatever. So that's just my barrier, but I do ask that students do this for themselves as much as for the purpose of sharing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. This time component is really, really important, right? Because for a lot of our projects, our time is allocated to very specific things. So I'd be curious, either Diane or someone else who has successfully shared their data, how did you find the time to do it? And how did you plan the time to do it?
So I would like to share my experience.
Go ahead.
We recently worked on FAO pilot study for urban food systems. And when we were planning for the study at that time itself, we had discussed that the questionnaires and the survey material which will be there will be shared afterwards on a dashboard or through links so that it will be useful for everyone. So this was decided at the start itself, that helped us throughout the process. And because we were working in India and Nepal, we had local languages and all questionnaires in local languages. But we also made sure that we are preparing everything in English, which can be used by many. So now we are working on how we can share the questionnaires and tools. Tools we have already disseminated, but we are designing the website and the dashboard, and we will be sharing all the questionnaires. So I think it has to be decided at an early stage that we will be disseminating it in all these steps. It becomes difficult afterwards. That's what I felt.
Thank you for sharing that example. Yeah, so it sounds like you planned very early and it was always part of your time and resource allocation to share data later.
Right, and it was also known to all the authorities, and if they were ready for this, then only we went ahead. So it does not create any kind of, unhappiness afterwards.
Yeah. So you got everyone to agree that this was okay from the beginning, which also creates some accountability for you. I'm seeing a lot of people share. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, it also helped us to take care of the national guidelines, because India has different guidelines, Nepal has different guidelines. So we also followed them from the start. Thank you. Sorry to.
No, thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to unmute and share?
I was in Diane's group, and she obviously elaboratively explained the challenges of sharing data, but we also discussed quite a bit about the value of sharing data beyond from a researcher's point of view. I look to do some research, which is participatory action research. And one of the core principles of that is to consider how I give back value to the people I'm working with. And it's very easy to forget that the moment we are spending time with people, we are taking their time, we are taking their information, and they invest in what we're gonna give back, right? And if we can make data go further in terms of research and have more of an impact, then it might be the right thing to do, because that allows then potentially to impact the people we did the research with in more meaningful ways. And it then also has an opportunity to create a better profile for research in its own, on its own, because if we consistently extract without giving back as researchers, what do we mean for community and society?
Wow, yeah, that's a great example. Is there a time you've been able to share data back to a community that you collected it from?
Yes, but on a very low key. So I was in my undergrad, where I basically shared the outcomes of my research, and it wasn't meaningful enough, as in it didn't show significant impacts. So therefore the conversation wasn't deep enough for them potentially. But I think it's really important to do that. And when I now work with people who I interview, I try to think about, what can I give back within this process? Do I have something which would add value to them? And it might not be that piece of research I'm doing, it might be something else I can give back. So I've interviewed some potato growers in the UK, and I've done some research on life cycle analysis with potatoes, which they may not be aware of. So can I help them to gain from that piece of research?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Okay, we're coming up on the end of the session, and I really appreciate everyone who shared in the chat. It sounds like you had some very fruitful discussions in the breakout rooms. And I really want to thank everyone for taking some time out of your morning or your midday or your evening to join us. And I hope you'll come back to a lot of other ANH Academy sessions this week and next week. Before we wrap up our session, we have a very short feedback survey we hope that you'll fill out. It's just 4 questions, and I'm putting our link to a Qualtrics survey in the chat. So if you could take a few minutes as we're wrapping up the session to fill it out, we would love to hear your feedback on this session. And you can reach Will and I at our Tufts email addresses. And we also have an email address for SCANR. So we would, if there's anything you didn't get to share, or you have further thoughts, we would definitely love to hear from all of you. And we hope that you'll continue to engage on SCANR and continue to use it. And also, we got so many ideas during this session of what could be added or what could be changed. But we hope you'll continue to engage in that way. And as you leave, I'll put the conference link in the chat again. On this page, you can see the full program for this week and for next week, if you're interested in joining more learning labs or hearing some of the research discussions we'll have next week.